It'll There'll be a little bit of a delay, but I'm testing the audio. I'm going to test one more audio level. This is a different audio level so that we don't have the same problem we had yesterday. Now I got to kill the music. I know. Everybody watching, the audio, the music. There, I killed the music. Look at that. We actually have audio. John, you don't know this, but audio recording was a whole thing yesterday. It was bad. If you were here live, you got to hear it. But if you went to watch the recording, you know what? Sometimes things happen once, and they're a moment in time. But welcome to day 2 of Shift Change, brought to you by Cognite here at CERAWeek. I am joined by Jon, one of the coolest guys that I've worked with across my whole career. I mean that, but also I know it makes you deeply uncomfortable to tell you that, which I can relate to. So before we dive into some of the interesting topics, why don't you introduce yourself to LinkedIn and YouTube?
Great. Thanks, Justin. So I'm Jon Haslanger. I'm a principal solutions architect here at Cognite, which basically means that I get to work with big industrial companies in oil and gas, energy, life sciences, chemicals, manufacturing, to figure out how to build really cool and interesting data ops layers that enable decision analytics, AI, and agentic workflows, which are all things I really love. So I basically just get to play with toys all the time for my job,
Cool.
which I love.
Yeah. And now influencer, tiny mic influencer. You can add that to the roles.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I really enjoy talking about the technology too.
Perfect. So see, here we go. Before we jump into your awesome presentation, let's talk about, because part of the goal here is for us to share what's going on at CERAWeek to those who couldn't make it. And as we did yesterday, want to start again today. First off, recognizing our colleagues in the Middle East. Energy is a global industry, right? And certainly thinking about our colleagues who are under a lot of stress, a lot of danger right now. We're thinking about you, and we're certainly hoping this thing comes to an end quickly.
Yeah.
So some news from yesterday, great sessions. In one of the sessions, the CEO of ThyssenKrupp said, hey, he suggested that he expects strategic tariffs put in place by the EU on metals to protect the domestic metal market, which I went and did a little Google News search. Apparently, absolute breaking news to the industry. So that's what Shift Change is here for, to share that with you. We won't dive into the politics part of that. One, it's not long enough. It's only an hour. And two, we might get in trouble. So well, instead, it is interesting, though. We're seeing this kind of thinking, especially in Europe, about how do we bring a resurgence to industry, a resurgence to domestic energy. Are you seeing that with Cognite customers as well? This kind of growing interest from Europe?
Yes. I mean, I think there's a lot of threads in there that are being driven by what's going on. Not only is it about localizing manufacturing, where especially for critical industries like metals, like energy, like oil and gas, everyone's much more aware about the importance of having a localized or short supply chain to making sure that their citizens are able to get those critical items affordably. And companies are looking at also their existing supply chains. They want to understand how resilient they are. They need to understand their exposure to their supply chains in near real time. So when something like this comes out, they can understand, all right, well, what's my expected orders that I'm maybe impacted under these tariffs? What orders are not going to arrive? What am I going to have to resource? What deliveries does this now put at risk? And that's something where they need to now be able to make these decisions very quickly and understand how to use all that information to make the best decision. So I think I think there's a big focus not only in Europe but also in America about having much more localized manufacturing, and then also for manufacturers to understand where their supply chains extend to and what are their supply chain risks and how to respond to the ever-changing global environment.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we saw that you talked about affordability, and we saw that was another bit of news coming out yesterday. The Minister for Energy from Germany actually on stage was saying that, if we're all honest, of course she speaks mainly for Germany, but that Europe, in her opinion, had focused heavily, and rightfully so, on sustainability. but had accidentally taken their eye off of affordability and reliability, right? And mentioned a lot was Germany's decision to decommission all their nuclear power, which now, you know, there was a lot of conversations about regret on that, and even some opinions shared that was just an outright mistake. But it ties into what you said, right? That affordability thing that all kind of regions are really looking at, and then the industries are responding to that look of reliability, affordability, survivability of supply chains, which is really important. One last thing, and I'd love to get your view on this, Jon, because you get to work with all sorts of customers across energy. BP yesterday in one of the sessions spoke about usage of AI that they're using on exploratory platforms in the Gulf of Mexico / Gulf of America. And there's this thing called a kick, which, right, is extra pressure unexpectedly coming out of the well and causes all sorts of downtime. They said normally this would cause 2 weeks of downtime, but they're using AI to predict that it's coming, which then allows them to prepare the platform better. And they reported that they were able to go from 2 weeks to 2 hours, which is huge, right? Because they said the cost is over $1 million a day when they're down. Curious your view on that. Are you seeing that with other energy customers? Are we starting to see the benefit of AI show up?
Yes, I think we generally see AI being deployed across the energy space, both to improve availability, improve affordability, everything from power generation, grid optimization. To be honest, refining was one of the first users of AI decades and decades ago to actually optimize their splits.
Wait, AI's not new? Oh my gosh.
No, my friend, it's older than both of us, sadly. Yeah. But it's, and I think BP now looking for new applications and really pushing into a place that's been slow to change in terms of drilling, is a smart move. I mean, energy is one of those critical resources that you have to develop, but also because of the way what's involved in developing it, you've got to be responsible about how you develop it. And well control is critical to being responsible about developing energy in the right way. So yes, using AI to try and predict when you're going to have kicks and try and address them more faster. Yes, it's a cost savings, but I also think that there's a lot of intangible benefits to what they're doing there, just for reducing the risk of a spill, environmental discharge, or heaven forbid, any sort of disaster after that. And what's interesting for me in that is, well, AI is not necessarily new with the way that BP and others are looking at data. The data they have available and the way they're able to make that available for AI quickly is new. Because if you think about what influences a kick as they're drilling, it's not just, despite when people say, you know, black magic and wizardry, that all of a sudden the earth starts pushing back at them on the drilling fluid. You know, they're drilling into a new geological layer that has higher pressure. Geologists build very complex models to predict that. They probably have offset wells that have data that can predict some of that stuff as well. But that data may not be accessible to make that decision quickly. And now with a combination of making data available with things like contextualized knowledge graphs, and also then being able to deploy AI on top of it, you can almost have this, I'd say, wizard-like capability to basically predict the future, to predict what's going to happen ahead of your bit. Yes. Can you avoid drilling around that layer? No. I mean, you got to drill through it. You know you're going to have a pressure change. You got to deal with it, but you can be ready to deal with it. You can be prepared and not be surprised. And we all know that when you're prepared for an adverse situation, it's far better than getting caught on the back foot. So exciting to see that BP is doing that, and they're willing to share that publicly as well. Especially in this case, I feel like too often companies are secretive about what they're doing. Yep. And in something like this, it's important that others see BP leading the way there and build off of that.
And so now you see why Jon is one of my favorite people to work with, because we can have this detailed conversation. If I were to switch it over to life sciences, you immediately would have the same amount of detailed information. And so it's just always a lot of fun to talk with you. So you're hot off the stage, right? Giving a really cool presentation with NVIDIA. explain the topic to the folks viewing using the same kind of lens, right? Which is explain it like Justin could understand it.
Sure. No. So what I was talking about was how we can use this new family of AI technology that NVIDIA calls Tesseract models in an industrial setting to essentially predict failures, predict events before they happen, and then use contextualized data and knowledge graph with AI agents to then actually take action upon that. So what is so disruptive about this technology is it's built around time series data, which are the data points that come in from sensors one after another, whether it's the temperature every minute or every 10 seconds, or the pressure of a reaction, or fluid flow rates. That data is coming in every couple of seconds. And new facilities that are being built have hundreds of these sensors, way more than any human, even a super smart one like Justin, could actually manage to look at and monitor.
I can only monitor 3.
So you have to, you either ignore 90% of them, which honestly is what we've been doing up till now, or you try and build custom fine-tuned models to predict these, but you need a lot of historical data with those fine-tuned models. Now, what's so transformative about Tesseract is like ChatGPT for time series data, where, it used to be if I wanted ML to suggest what present I should buy my wife for the holidays, I would have to give it a list of presents I've bought, whether they were good presents or not.
Vacuum, not good.
Yeah, no. Iron, also not good.
Ooh, no.
Iron, very bad.
Yeah.
But now with these generative models, it's like ChatGPT, where I don't have to have trained ChatGPT on all the bad presents I've given my wife before and all the trouble I've gotten into about that. It knows, it has some of this knowledge from being trained on general world data, and it's able to respond to my question and create predictions. Tesseract models are the same thing for time series, where it doesn't have to be trained on the time series of a specific asset or equipment to be able to predict what that time series is going to look like in the future. So that means that very quickly, with what we call zero shot, which just means I ask it to predict the time series and it does. So we're doing now is we're using it to deploy this across many sites very quickly to just have predictive models for various time series data. There's a customer that's using it now to predict a few critical quantities, such as the amount of water it's in a reaction. If they get it too high, they burn millions of dollars of extra energy. If it's too low, the whole reaction crashes and their plant shuts down. And they're able to do that now with Tesseract models very quickly and at scale. And what this now enables is a lot more customers to get a lot more value out of the data that we're collecting, because what they realized is that with conventional data science methods, you kind of can only, data scientists can only build so many models. Just can only watch so many tags. Even with auto ML technologies, you can only go so big, and that's a fraction of where we need it to be. So I see Tesseract as sort of that ChatGPT-like transformation in our ability to use data and basically automate the work that's happening in sites and factories. So again, older facilities that are now being kept online with fewer people in them because they're in places like the US and Europe, where workers make a higher salary. So you have to do more with fewer workers. These are great technologies to improve the productivity, improve the throughput, and then ultimately improve the resiliency of domestic and localized supply chains.
And the safety too, right? Yesterday, I was talking with JML, the founder of Cognite. We were talking about, there's all these other parts that come along with it that people don't think about. So like if you think of the North Sea, where a lot of platforms are from Norway and the UK, horrible environment, right? And you have to go out on a helicopter, gale force winds, nobody's having fun, right? And this concept of you're doing it with fewer people, but those fewer people also are safer, right? And we're talking about some of these things start enabling what JML called the 1 day back home trips, right? Which is that people are starting to be able to go out with the right parts and come back as if they just went to the office for the day, right? And be back for dinner. So you mentioned these older assets, right? Which is the industry term for what other industries would call a facility, right? Or a factory or building. These facilities, some of them being built in the 70s, the 60s even, they have IT systems that were put in place in the late 80s. And they have that, but then also that same company is saying, I want to apply generative AI. And I want it in the cloud. But my 1980s IT system is on-prem, running on a server that has that weird beige plastic that's yellowed, and we don't touch it because we can't replace it. From an architecture standpoint, you're working on these problems. How are companies bridging that gap and applying models like that to data sets that are coming off of these incredibly old machines?
So that's, I think, the reality of business today. A lot of times people will see visionary architectures, visionary IT processes, and they get very excited and say, we're going to go there. And it's great to have a North Star. It's great to have a direction. It's absolutely critical for your strategy. But you also need to understand the realities of the business and where you are today, where, yes, getting to this North Star is a multi-year journey usually. Very typically intensive investments required because you've got to upgrade a lot of sources and systems. And it's not practical today. And you need results today. So a lot of it is, and these are the discussions I have with a lot of our customers is, yes, this is your North Star. Let's understand where we are today, figure out how we get there, but also let's figure out how we get value from the data that you have today.
Yep.
So you can start getting value with AI in 8 to 12 weeks.
Yep.
So practically that means, yes, maybe instead of everything being fully cloud native, et cetera, you have some servers that are running on site, and then you have to deploy pipelines to take the data from that site, securely move it up to the cloud, and then contextualize it and have the data run in the cloud as well. And then be able to evolve those over time. Now, and there are some things that you can do in your cloud architecture that makes that journey much less painful. Where if you have a certain modularity to the data standards that you're using and the data models that you're using and the connectors that you're using to source systems, and then you're able to actually sort of build and evolve these pipelines over time without having to rebuild a whole bunch of point-to-point integrations. And some customers that I work with, they're terrified about changing anything because they have this giant web of point-to-point integrations that are super fragile, and they're afraid if they touch anything, it's just going to collapse.
Yeah.
The reality is something's going to break, that it's going to collapse anyway, and it's better to actually start preventing it proactively, slowly starting to shift that over towards a standard data ops layer that's built around some information standards that are relevant for the types of information that business is using, whether it's ISO 95 in manufacturing or 88 when you're dealing with batches or other related standards, and start that transition, slowly migrate information across, and then it makes each subsequent system replacement easier.
Yep.
Your overall architecture much more robust and reliable. And ultimately, it starts you down this journey towards that North Star, because the business can stomach starting with a small pilot, replacing some systems here and there. What they can't stomach is saying, well, we're going to rip everything out, spend X tens of millions of dollars and replace everything. Oh, yeah, and we're not going to have any of our business systems for the next 12 to 18 months.
Especially when it's already working. It is working, right? They can't optimize like they could, but it is running. They're making a profit.
Absolutely.
So let's take a pivot here. You've been at the Cognite booth. There are some really cool pictures of you talking with the Secretary of Energy. The booth earlier today, the Secretary of the Interior came by. Quite funny for our international audience. We have friends who are our colleagues who are from Norway and France, and they were joking with me this morning. They said, hey, we had to Google what the Secretary of the Interior does. And I was explaining it to them, and they said, oh yeah, that's basically what Google told us they do. So I'm curious, what are you hearing from folks, right? And what are you, what's the buzz around the booth? Not what Cognite's doing, but what are people coming with questions and those kind of things?
It's a really interesting discussion. I think there are some definitely everyone wants to understand how they can deploy AI, how they can deploy AI at scale, how they can have AI be trustable in an industrial environment.
Yep.
Because that's still super critical to success. I mean,
Yep.
you need to have the right business decisions made. They also want to understand how AI can work with some of their messy, complex industrial data, manufacturing data, and in energy. You sometimes as well have specific types of data around power generation or like time series or documents. A lot of questions around dealing with all these legacy information types, like you were saying, Justin. You know, if someone has, they don't have 3D models, they just have old flat PDFs. How can they?
And they've been told to apply AI, right?
Exactly.
It's come down from above that you will use AI, and they're bumping into that then.
Exactly. It's how can we apply AI with the technology that we have quickly, and then how can we make it approachable for our users and trustable for our users as well?
Yep.
Because while you can maybe make a CEO happy for one quarter because they can announce that their AI project has launched and is successful, ultimately it's not going to be successful for the company long term if they don't get that project adopted by the users. And it's got to be trustable, it's got to be transparent for the users, and it's got to work with all the messy manufacturing data. Because I think some of the low-hanging fruit around dealing with clean, structured data that maybe comes from procurement POs or finance data, that's kind of been captured in a lot of places. And the next step for getting a lot of the gains is going into this messy manufacturing data.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to throw a curveball at you here. I didn't say we'd talk about this, but I'm interested, and it's kind of coming from these conversations you're hearing. Yesterday, they had someone from Accenture was talking about AI has started to, in the energy industry, start to address use cases that lower cost, which is great, right? They said that's good. People are happy. We talked about the BP one, right? But it was their opinion that to truly drive that 5x return on investment that folks are looking for, you have to start impacting the revenue side of the P&L. Are you hearing about that from folks as they're saying, hey, I've got this problem with legacy data, you know, and then you say, okay, we can help you solve that. You start to get into use cases. Are you seeing that Cognite's customers and the folks you're talking to are starting to think about that revenue side use cases, or is that an area that the industry is really going to have to do work on in the next year?
I think it's a mix. I think various customers that we go into, they have different problems, different challenges. And I feel like, you know, in digital transformation with AI, like medicine, you know, that prescribing something without doing a diagnosis first is bad practice. You know, same way
usually,
you don't want a doctor to just say, oh, I think you have a broken leg without actually diagnosing
doing an X-ray,
it. Yes. Same thing to go in and say, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z with your data and deploy this AI, and that's going to fix all your problems. I think just from a business point of view, yes, when you can grow top line, that always is more impressive to shareholders and a much bigger impact than trying to shrink and control the cost component.
Yep.
I think where it's a mistake is when people start looking at AI as a way to shrink their IT costs. When you're saying, oh, I just want to rationalize my tech stack and I can do this, I can apply AI here and I save this and I, you know, save 500K here. In the grand scheme of things of your company, that's a fraction of a percent and you're, you know, losing the forest for the trees. Really, it's either can we do a massive savings across the company by allowing us to, you know, improve our supply chain, source smarter, avoid waste. I mean, there's a lot of big changes. I'm just, you know, a lot of use cases, exciting use cases, for example, around just allowing companies to minimize scrap, reduce scrap, improve quality. Now that it does reduce cost, but it's on a huge transformational level.
Yeah.
There are things as well where you can work on growing top line. You know, everything from being able in energy, especially where you're able to do everything from, for example, place wells faster so you can develop your fields faster. That's a great way to grow top line. In refining and chemicals, you know, where you're often capacity constrained on your assets and your resources, you can save a day or two off of a turnaround by deploying AI. That's direct $1 million, $2 million a day to your top line. Another great way to save money. So, or to add to the company. So I would say both matter, both are impactful. obviously have to understand what that specific company situation is.
Yep.
And I wouldn't say neglect either of them, but the mistake that people make is when they think that AI is an IT cost savings tool.
Yep.
Yeah, that's when you're not looking big enough. You're not being ambitious enough.
Awesome. Okay. So you work with a lot of customers, right? Obviously, you help them with a lot of demos, with a lot of POCs, right? But you also help customers get to scale. In industry, when it comes to digital activities, we've all lived it. There's a really bad habit to make a lot of POCs, lighthouses, demos. Everyone gets excited.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't go anywhere,
Yeah.
right? What are you seeing that works to bridge that gap? Or let's put it this way, what are you seeing breaks when you go from demo to POC up to scale? And then what are you seeing people are doing that works to get that POC to scale?
So I think the answers to that are somewhat related. I think going back to what we were talking about finding the right business problem and understanding and diagnosing the business problem. You have to have an upfront conversation about understanding is this POC just something that's really cool because I want to see this technology and I'm told to deploy something that is AI,
Yep.
but it's ultimately not bringing value to the business, or it's not something that the end users are going to adopt. And then two, it's how can I scale this out in a way that is going to work across the enterprise? And that's where it becomes a much more involved discussion around, for example, the solution architecture, where it's much easier for someone to build a small POC or an AI pilot that runs on one site with a limited amount of data. But then the complexity goes up by an order of magnitude once you start going and saying, all right, well, now we've got to scale this across 40 sites with 40 use cases, and we need to do this in a year.
Yeah.
And that's where, honestly, we just don't think about customers thinking about how they're going to do that, understand the viability. And in one way, maybe it's unfair for me to expect customers to think about that, because a lot of them don't even know the unknowns that they'll find or the landmines they'll find when they try to go to scale it. Everything from dealing with trying to store their data, link their data, find the right data to link to that ML model, maybe even process that data. If they've got, as you were saying, if you've got flat scanned PDFs of your drawings and we've got to find all the tag names on it for your POC, sure, you could outsource it, and they outsourced to a low-cost country and they had 50 people do that for one site. Oh, but wait, we would need how many thousand people to do this across the enterprise? Or there was another customer that I was looking at where it's they were looking at scaling the number of batches they produced, where it's with a conventional approach, they were thinking, if we have to do all these quality reports manually and we don't have the data linked and we aren't able to deploy AI agents on top of it, we'd have to deploy how many hundreds of engineers? And it was the point where literally it was like a fraction of the population of the city they were in before they would be to actually hire to do this.
Yep.
So I think people don't think about what scaling looks like, and they need to think about that. And I absolutely agree with you. And that's one of the reasons why AI sometimes gets a bad rap for sitting in this sort of pilot purgatory, because people get excited about a technology without sort of thinking about some of the less sexy and exciting infrastructure layers that need to be in place for that scaling to occur.
Yeah. And I remember working with one customer at Cognite where we actually did the math, to your point about the city, right? And we did the math, and the limiting factor, without addressing these data challenges, the limiting factor was actually their ability to hire people.
Yeah.
And that was it, right? And the breakthrough was having, then how do we get around that, right? It was through the data modeling and everything. So before we went live, we were joking about tiny mics and cameras and stuff, and how we can just get on the internet now with some tiny mics, a gimbal, and we're live on YouTube, we're live on LinkedIn. And it wasn't that long ago that we could do webinars from home, and that was woohoo.
Yes.
We were cooking with fire right there. And then before that, we remember what was it called? Ustream or something. You had to hire a company, and they had to bring in a bunch of stuff just to go live like we are from here. And that all seems very silly now.
Yeah.
What, in your view, are is industry building on the digital front that 5-10 years from now, in your opinion, will kind of do the same thing? We'll be like, do you remember when we built this thing, or we had to do this thing that, now we're taking that we have to do, but 10 years from now, it's going to be quite silly to think about.
Yeah, so I think in 10 years from now, we'll laugh about the number of dashboards that we built to make decisions. I think in 10 years from now, a lot of the interaction with data is going to be through agents, that when we have a question, we're going to ask an agent that question. It's going to give us the answer. If we need detailed analysis or we need reports written, the agents will write those reports for us and give us that in basically near real time. And all these hundreds, thousands in some cases of Power BI or Tableau dashboards that industries rely on today and have small armies maintaining today are essentially going to fade away, because you're going to get the right answer to your specific question in a trustable way with an agent that has access to the right data and that has the capabilities to do the data analytics that you need. I mean, we're already seeing this today with frontier models that are able to analyze data, use tools to actually do analysis on that data, make charts, make graphs, give you insights on that, recommend next actions. And then what we're also seeing with customers is when they link that with a knowledge graph, especially, they're able to avoid hallucinations by having the agent only work on the right data that's in the context window. And because it's off of a graph, not a vector RAG, it's deterministic. So it knows exactly what it needs to pull in. You avoid hallucinations that way. So it becomes trustable. And then you can ask the agent to even show its work where it provides links back to those sources. So I think we'll laugh about the amount of hours and effort that we put into building beautiful dashboards that I'm sure 10 years from now, no one's going to look at.
And not only all the effort we put in and how we use them, but also all the beautiful like marketing videos and stuff, right? You have the control room and the dashboards are on the wall and everyone goes, ooh, clap, clap, clap. I certainly hope we get there, right? Because I never learned how really to make a dashboard in Power BI. And if we could figure out how to do that quick enough that I never have to, I would see that as a win, personally.
I think it's coming. I mean, we have customers today that are adopting a personalized user experience where an agentic experience is the primary experience for certain workers in certain roles. So I think our early adopters are there leading the way. And I think over the next 10 years, the rest of industry is going to catch up with that.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate your time. We've covered all sorts of really cool things. Let's get into some serious questions, though. Okay. So you travel to shows like this all the time. For those who weren't with us yesterday, what you don't see is first off, we're, the show Between the Ferns. We're not between the ferns. We're in front of the fake tree, which is like the ferns. I mean, there's fake ferns here, so we're in front of the fake ferns. But we're also right next to the snack bar, which has the cool name Marketplace, right? Yes. What is your go-to snack during a show?
During a show, I try to stick with, if I can get fruit or vegetables, I try to stick with that.
You got to pick. We've got fruit or we've got the veggie with hummus tray.
So I'm going to go with the fruit over the veggie with hummus tray.
Okay.
Partly that's because I'm a little bit of a messy eater and I actually have a clean shirt on today. So hummus is a little high risk for me.
Got it.
I mean, thinking about risk mitigation from the energy industry, I got to do a risk assessment on eating hummus and
it's no good.
I don't have the right PPE on to eat hummus. I probably need to do, put on an apron if I'm going to go that direction.
Similar.
Yeah. So,
okay, cool. You travel about as much as I do. So obviously all the movies in the in-flight entertainment system you've already watched.
Yeah.
Right. That's done. What is your go-to move on a flight? Are you Netflix binging? Are you reading a book? What are you doing? If it's binging, what are you binging?
No, so usually it'll be one or two things. I'll do some reading. There are a couple of books that I like to read. It's either work-related books around AI technology, catching up with news of what's going on in the world. And I do love the occasional like spy thriller novel. That's fun.
Yep.
Or just, putting my hood up and closing my eyes and sleep too.
Yeah.
I have a remarkable gift of being able to sleep in lots of all sorts of
I wish
positions.
I had that. My life would be so much better if I could pull that off.
Yeah.
So you can actually take the window seat and go to sleep.
Yeah, I have it. Fortunately, I'm can kind of wedge myself in the seat, and I'm generally wedged in there anyway because like you, I'm a bigger person.
Coach,
of course,
right?
and coach, yes. And then just close my eyes when I can, and hopefully I wake up and we're where I need to be.
See, I am beyond envious of you at this point. I can't. I've tried. I can't. Maybe a red eye. I'll put on the eye mask, little melatonin, hope for the best. But that's about as close as I get.
I will tell you the worst feeling though is when I fall asleep, and then I wake up and we're on the ground, and then I realize we're in the same airport because there are 50 planes waiting to take off.
Yes, and you can't recover from that because you did your nap, right?
Exactly.
So, yes, that I totally understand. I'm looking around real quick because our friend from NVIDIA hasn't made it yet, so we get bonus time with you. If that's okay,
can we? Fine. Let's keep talking.
We'll go through here a little bit. So, we are in what's called the Next Gen Amphitheater area. Yesterday, there was a lot of conversations around the workforce, and you didn't prepare for this question, but I think it's a good one. There was this conversation around how companies can't hire people, right? And good conversations around we have to make the industry more interesting. We have to make it more inclusive. We have to do better training. I think that's all good, right? We need to do that. But we also see just demographical shifts in countries where the workforce is slowly disappearing, right? The hireable group of folks. What are you seeing, or what are some early signs? You said, hey, I like reading about the topic. What are some early things that have you excited about how AI is going to augment people in a way that enables companies to continue to hire, to continue to bring folks on, but adapt to the realities of that labor pool shrinking on them?
No, that's a great point, because you're right. There are certain industries and certain verticals do have certain images that they're definitely working on improving and do provide great jobs, I think, for people. But you're right. Demographics are demographics. You can't fight that. It's going to be a shrinking labor pool. I think part of it is using technology to enable workers to do more. So again, like we were talking about, where it's not one supervisor that has 5 workers. It might be one supervisor that's got 2 workers and a team of AI agents that are working under them to do a lot of the tools that AI agents can do and automate the processes. I think as well, specific industries and companies can also take a hard look at their work processes and at the tools and the systems they ask employees to do, especially when they're trying to attract fresh hires and graduates, and see how that meshes with the systems that people are using in their personal lives. And I'll give you another example, Justin, where, today, if I want to go out to a nice restaurant for dinner, and I'm trying to get out of the doghouse with my wife because I bought her that iron for the holidays,
and on a plane too much.
Exactly. And I'm trying to do so. I go, and today I can go to Google Maps. It'll show me restaurants. It'll show me reviews. I can tap on one. It'll show me the hours of when it's open, and it'll tell me how long it takes to get there. And even from that one platform, I can book a cab to get there. And that's all that information is in a single platform, because all that data is contextualized together. If you're our age, you remember when we used to
I just want to be clear. I got called old on the internet. I mean, it's true, but like, okay. Yeah.
We're both.
We remember when.
Yeah. You used to have to go to one website to figure out, read reviews of restaurants. Or even pull out the paper guide. Read reviews of restaurants, see where they were. And then you'd have to go to another website or a map, or to figure out how to get a person there, or call, and then you have to call them to make a reservation.
No.
And
I'm out.
Because none of this information was contextualized together, then you have to call somebody else to get a ride to the restaurant.
And we're good millennials. We don't call people.
No,
that's
we can't.
No.
So in our personal lives, we expect all the information to be contextualized, but in a lot of professional situations in plants and sites, there's not that same expectation for data to be contextualized. So when a younger worker comes in and they're like, I've got to go into 7 different systems, one for my work orders, one to get my plans, one to call somebody to figure out who's on staff, it doesn't align with the way they're used to accessing systems, the way they're used to working with it, because they don't have that contextualized information, and the work experience they have is not a familiar experience with them. So yes, there'll be a small percentage of people that are super adaptable and can figure it out. But let's be honest, if you want to make your job as attractive as possible to as many people as possible, meet them where they are.
Yeah.
Give them that contextualized experience where maybe even you have some AI on top of them that matches, so they can book a work order the same way they can book an Uber to their restaurant that night.
Yep.
And the work order can check to make sure that the parts are in stock the same way that the Google Maps checks to make sure the restaurant's open and you can book a reservation and has a table available.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's about meeting people where they are and making their work experience friendlier for the type of way they're used to interacting with technology in their day-to-day life.
Yeah. And a really real kind of tactical example of that is a customer that we work with told me a story about needing to get different drawings and actually having to, when they needed the drawing, they had to go to a centralized storage that was on site, but was a good 10-15 minute golf cart drive, because these facilities are huge. And once you go there, nothing was organized, right? It's whoever left it where it's on a shelf, because you don't want to organize digital data, but people also don't want to organize drawing data either. Nope. And could spend hours just looking for one drawing that they needed, right? And this was a huge challenge for them. And it's not just about what their expectations are, but even if their expectations were changed, there's still all this lost time, right?
Yeah.
And it is interesting because it's changing so rapidly, and yet not fast enough at the same time, right, to meet some of the expectations that people have coming from their personal life.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a great example where data is still siloed. And what's interesting for me is when companies take that first step into unsiloing that data, where they'll say, all right, well, we're taking our digital data, our drawing room, and then we're scanning it, but it's still in a file store somewhere, and all the files just have names A0001, A0002, etc. So it's still just as unfindable as it was when it was in that physical file room. And I think companies adopting to that.
And by the way, we're still going here.
Okay.
It's just, this happened yesterday too. See, we're back. I never claimed that this was a professional outfit, so people could hear us, but they couldn't see us there for a hot second. And like I said, I never claimed that I knew what I was doing on this, and we proved it again twice, 2 days in a row.
Well, but to your point, it's things are not going back to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Things are not always going to be super findable, super accessible, and there will be incremental steps to taking that. The first step is digitizing it, which means it saves them the 15-minute drive. But they still have to spend the hours looking through the data. Then the next step is going to be potentially contextualizing it, so then someone can find it very quickly. Then there may even be some AI enrichment of the data, etc. Reviews of those drawings where you can actually do some work where those drawings are checked against data that's coming in from, for example, time series historians, SAP data, to say, hey, is this drawing still as we're operating today? Because you'd be amazed the number of sites that I go to where you start pulling in drawings and they still contain things that were built but then have been decommissioned years ago. But they're still there on the drawings and maybe in one system but not in another system.
Different names, different.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because and I just want to define some terms, right? Because we're used to terms like contextualization. Obviously, folks know what the definition of contextualization is, but in this context, what you're saying is bringing in that different data, and while this doesn't exist, there's not an actual string, but it's essentially tying strings between all the data, so that when you click on something, when you search something, it's not just giving you, okay, here's the one thing, right? I looked for this drawing, here's the drawing. It's saying, I'm looking for this sensor. And it says, great, here are 5 drawings with that sensor. Here are 6 data feeds. If you click on something in the drawing, it says, okay, here's all the other things this is associated with. Here's the flow, all of that. That's kind of what contextualization means for the layperson, right?
Yeah.
So, which is cool. By the way, you didn't see this, but up here, there's a huge screen over here, and I got to see Jon on this big, massive screen just a little bit ago. So you're famous on the internet. You're famous on the screens here at CERAWeek. Jon is the face of CERAWeek at this point, I think.
I think that might be a little exaggeration, but thank you.
I mean, you should ask them for the check in the mail, though. I mean, if they're going to put you on the big fancy screen, you know, royalties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Got to see what comes out of that.
Absolutely. Another thing I have to, and we're still looking, our friend from NVIDIA. This is the thing about CERAWeek, right? Though, is it's dynamic. We're moving. Yeah. So we're going to keep going together. If you're okay with that, your schedule good.
Keep going.
Cool. So let's talk about maybe something that folks don't expect from CERAWeek, which is you work with a lot of life science customers as well. Can you connect for the folks watching some of the things that happen in life sciences that you're working on that's coming over to energy and stuff from energy that's going over to life sciences?
Yeah, so I think it's one of the interesting parallels between both of those industries is the importance of quality and investigating defects.
Yeah.
I mean, partly because both of those industries are what I'll call very high impact industries.
And zero fail industries.
Exactly, zero fail. You know, you have a process failure in oil and gas, you know, you end up on the news because there's a fire, there's a disaster.
Significant impact, right?
Significant
in fact,
impact.
It was in the news down here last night. There was an accident at a refinery about an hour away, and people were getting sheltered in place and all sorts of stuff.
Exactly. And then in life sciences, same thing. You know, medicine that's going into humans has to be right. There's zero room for that to be wrong.
Yep.
And there are also industries that are under tremendous pressure to provide more of what they're doing, provide the next generation of what they're doing, and provide it for a lower cost.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that I'll give one example that each industry is doing well that the others can learn from. I think one thing that the energy industry is doing very well is building robust processes around investigating failures, non-conformances, deviations, whatever word you're saying. It's basically when something doesn't go quite as planned, how to react to that very quickly, how to respond to that very quickly, and how to capture those learnings and disseminate them so they don't ever happen again. I think that's something that energy industry does very well. And in life sciences, especially with the rise of things like individualized medicine, the way that they process deviations and quality reports is going to have to accelerate massively.
It's slower. It still is safe, but it's slower. Right?
Slow. It's safe, but it's very slow.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Is the energy industry is able to do it very quickly. The life sciences industry historically, because you've been able to make a few very large batches, hasn't had the pressure to do it quickly. And now with the changed individualized therapies, cell therapies,
which means, by the way, a therapy for just Jon or just Justin.
Exactly, where the number of batches basically is the number of patients you're trying to treat, which means many orders of magnitude increase that they're going to have to process all of the quality paperwork so much faster. Now, one thing I think the life sciences industry is doing very well is they're taking a holistic approach to understanding how they want to organize their information to make it most accessible for AI agents.
Yeah.
Because one of the things about AI agents is, if you think about them, they're kind of like an eager, but maybe a little bit naive new employee or new hire. So if you give the new technician the wrong manual and tell them to go do a repair, if it's close enough, they'll probably get a long way down that repair process with that machine, maybe mostly disassembled, before they're like, wait a second, that's not right. Same thing can happen with AI agents, where if you give the AI agent the wrong information, it's going to go very confidently say, oh, based on this wrong information you gave me, this is a very confident, convincing argument on you should do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And that's called context rot, where you give the wrong information to the AI in the context window. Life sciences is very good at taking a very structured and forward-looking approach to structuring that information around information model standards, which enables AI agents when they're deployed on top of that information. Even if they're answering a novel question, they can traverse the knowledge graph, understand that information model standard, and still find the right information. So it has the right manual, so to speak, to answer the question in the right way for the user. So I think deploying information models like that and information standards is something that enables a lot of future proofing and scalability of AI agents to use cases that we never even thought about. And that's one of the things that gets me excited about deploying agents on a knowledge graph versus a traditional sort of structured hierarchy or a SQL
Here's
database.
Your dashboard and
Exactly, with your dashboard, because you kind of need to know the problems you want to solve ahead of time, because you have to index your data and build the table in the way that makes it easy to understand.
And then if you think of something else, you got to go all the way back to the beginning.
Exactly, and you're duplicating your data, or you're trying to traverse in some weird way. With a graph, you just go about it in any different direction. Whether you want to look at it to traverse a hierarchy of assets and equipment, or go back, cut it in a completely different direction, and look at what is the lineage of this batch. Oh yeah, I went through this machine too, and I could go turn the corner and go up there to look at the assets, or I could just keep going this way and go further up the supply chain, back to raw materials and suppliers this way. And it's the same knowledge graph, same data store. We don't have to do anything different. And the AI agent can answer questions in all kinds of different directions.
Yeah.
I love what life science is doing there, but there are definitely lessons that they could learn from the energy industry in accelerating some of the quality processes.
Okay, cool. So we're getting towards the end here. Let me ask you a question, right? You've been so kind. You've given us an hour of your day, and then they're going to pull you right back into the Cognite booth, right? What is a question that customers aren't asking you right now that you think they should be asking you?
That's a very...
I just came up with that off the top of my head. I was like, that would be... I don't know the answer to it necessarily.
That's a very good question. I think a lot of people get excited here about AI, and even there's a very technical audience. So we're talking, and we're aligned with the hyperscalers. They're talking about cloud and the infrastructure challenges that we talked about. Very few people are asking me questions about how do I get my employees and my workers engaged with using these new types of solutions and ensuring that last key link of the chain to making sure that my AI investment is, first of all, has good AI science behind it, is scalable because it is the right data ops layer and infrastructure behind it, but then gets adopted by the users. And I don't have many customers asking about adoption. And I wish I had more people asking about adoption.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, that's good. And that's one of those things that's, when we talked about the POC to scale, that's where a lot of these things have failed also, right? Is even if they've bridged the technology gap, they've forgotten about the human side of it, right? And there's this challenge, coming from manufacturing before I came into technology, so there's this whole lost area of but that person is not actually being paid to use your technology. Yeah. They're brought in, and their job is to get an outcome, whether it's all the way down to building a certain subpart of an automobile or running, the actual pipes and valves on a platform, all the way up to the C-suite who's responsible for delivering value to shareholders, keeping everyone safe, right? Being sustainable and growing the business in a smart, safe way. At no point in any of those levels is it and adoption of technology tools, right? And I think you're right, people forget that part, right? That's not actually their job. Their job isn't to use the technology. Their job is to do the thing.
Exactly, to do the thing and do the job. And I think when you're going out there and trying to deploy technology, you need to be a little bit humble and understand what are the challenges of the people out there. One of the, I think, most adopted AI agents that we actually have in Cognite is one that came from talking to users at a paper mill in Pensacola, Florida. We're out there one day showing them some agents that were doing automated troubleshooting, really cool stuff. Thought it was the coolest technology ever. And very smart team there, very experienced team, as you said, very good at doing what they're doing. And they said, they're very polite. This is, this is great technology. But what I really need is when I'm coming back from my long off, or I've been off for 3-4 days, I'm coming back to the mill, I want to know what is the most important thing for me to start working on that morning. And I remember thinking about that, went back to the hotel room, ordered some DoorDash, and started working on that. And that was one of those things where, because the way that paper mill had been forward thinking and structured their data in an ops layer that was structured around a graph, we could essentially overnight build an agent that could traverse it in a new direction. So the supervisor the next morning, we were able to go in and show him a proof of concept around this ops summarizer agent that when he came in the morning, first thing, could talk to him and say, all right, this is what's been happening over the 4 days that you were off. These are the problems. These are the work orders done. These are the HSE risks. This is what's ongoing. So he didn't spend 2 hours behind his desk before he was able to get out there, boots on, hard hat on, engaging with his team, getting them started in the right direction. He was able to read that essentially while he had his coffee in the morning, and then come in, and day one, his team was able to be impactful from minute one. And we never thought of this. And this is why I think it's so important to talk to your end users, understand how they'll adopt it, get their feedback, be receptive to that feedback. And we're so grateful that he spoke up and mentioned that, because beyond that site, so many other customers have wanted agents that look like that and work like that, and their frontline teams love them.
And so it's almost like what we need to do is bring the safety vest and the hard hat and safety shoes back into fashion, right? We need to, as technology providers, one of the things I laugh about is you come to CERAWeek this week, and it's AI companies came to talk to energy companies, and energy companies came to talk to AI companies, but they're talking past each other. And I think part of it really is because technology companies have, at large, right? Obviously there are exceptions, right? We'd like to think at Cognite we're one of them, but even we can do better. Technology companies have, especially post-COVID, forgot that they can go put a safety vest on, they can put a hard hat on, they can sit through the safety video. They can go back to Walmart and buy a pair of safety shoes. The old ones, admittedly, probably are wore out. That's okay. And you can go break those shoes in again, and you can get dirty again, and you can go and see what's impacting folks in the field, like that story you told, where you have this wildly important thing that from the boardrooms you never would have brought it up or thought about it. So I appreciate you staying along with us. It's a dynamic week. Things come and change, and I appreciate you staying on. I think this conversation was great. I know the folks online are going to love it. And we actually had audio this time. Good. Excellent. Still haven't fixed the lighting thing. It's, it's a vibe. It's a mood. It's very purple in here. I will tell you why we've been sitting here. I've seen multiple people walk by with bubble tea. And so I have to go to a session, but I will be Googling how to get bubble tea in this room. Any last words for the friends on LinkedIn and YouTube before we let you get back to helping folks?
I think the last thing to think about, while everyone gets excited about AI, think about what's going to help your end users, and think about that data ops layer that's going to drive your AI. You hear it at every conference. People talk about, I built this data ops layer, and then I built the AI on top of it, and it doesn't get enough attention. And it's one of
Bring your mic up for us. Yeah,
it doesn't get enough attention, and it doesn't. And too often people neglect it, so it limits their ability to scale and be successful in the future. So think about everything holistically, from the end user of that solution on the plant floor, your infrastructure, how you're going to scale it and build it out and maintain it, and also that beautiful, exciting AI use case that you're going to deploy.
Awesome. Well, this has been another episode of Shift Change, live from CERAWeek, day 2. Join us again tomorrow, 12 Central, 1 Eastern, day 3, live from CERAWeek. We'll be bringing you the breaking news once again. We have Linda, VP of Energy from Cognite, joining us. We're going to have a really cool conversation, not just about her perspective on the energy industry, what she's seen at the show, but also I think a really important conversation around women in the industry, right? And how do we make this industry more open, more inclusive to all folks at all levels? So thank you again, Jon. Thank you to those online, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you, Justin.